Welcome to week 7, everyone. It's clear that this past week we were wrestling through a super challenging segment of Paul's argument in Romans. I hope that our discussion of this segment has shed some light on it, even if it still leaves us with many questions. There has been indeed something significant at stake in this section that we've just studied that we're going to have to keep in mind as we now get into the end of chapter 8. Because Paul has been concerned with this question of how our life is to be guided now that we are participating in this power of the Spirit that is Christ's own risen life among us. That's a question that has required Paul to deal with how the law does and does not guide our living together, the power that we have and the power we don't have when under the law, and that in contrast to the power of the Spirit that enables us to fulfill exactly the life that the law commands, a life of loving God and loving one another. And this is a life that is a matter of learning new habits together, new habits by the Spirit, which take time and struggle to develop as any good habits do, and which also require a community that sustains those habits as people die, as people leave, as people move around, and as the community continues. So the community has this role of passing along practices, habits that characterize our life together that need to continue even as the particular members of the community change, go and come, etc. So that's been key for Paul, getting to this point and emphasizing how there is indeed this power of the Spirit to enable us to embody the justice of God in ways that previously we were unable to do. So much of that involves the pattern of Christ's self-giving, the pattern of Christ's not self-righteousness, but mingling himself with what is broken and taking that brokenness as his own. That's a pattern by which we experience the power of the Spirit to embody justice together. And that's very different from sort of claiming an ideal of justice and then holding that over the heads of others or of one another in the community as something that you have to live up to in order to belong. That's not the way of fulfilling the law according to the Spirit, teaches Paul in this section. Now that is going to lead then to the end of chapter 8, where the scope of this drama that we find ourselves in is going to go explicitly cosmic. We are participating in the healing of the entire creation in this life by the Spirit. And it's not a life, this is important, it's not a life of triumphalism. It's not a life where we can just look back and say, look how just we're becoming. It's a life that involves groaning, so that the measure of justice that we manage to embody is itself together with a groaning for what remains broken about ourselves, about our world. So there's a really, I think, kind of important sensibility that this last section of Romans 8 is going to impress upon us. And I'm looking forward to our discussion of it. I want to keep this one short. You guys have got a full plate this week. You'll notice that there's just one response forum because I want to give you time to work on your peer reviews of one another's working papers and touch up your own working paper after you receive the review. We're obviously dealing with a lot less text in Romans as well. So I'm hoping that the kind of weekly work that we often require in this class has been reduced enough this week to give you the space to really concentrate on the last stage of this working paper assignment that I think is so important. Just to make sure we're all clear on the logistics of that, um, you'll see the instructions obviously in the work for the week and whatnot, the summary that I give. But just to clarify a few things that I know have already generated questions, you have left a complete draft of your working paper on your Google Doc. Now that is being shared with your partner, who is going to make suggestions in that Google Doc, either by writing directly in the body of the paper or using the comment function, but being sure to click on submit comment at the end of each comment so that it gets recorded on the document for the author. And in this process, you don't have to worry about messing up the author's draft, because I, as the owner of these Google Docs, can maintain the full history of the document. So don't worry about that. And then when you start to work on the paper yourself, your own paper, after the peer review is done, don't worry about erasing the reviewer's suggestions, resolving the comments. I can recover all of that to be able to give the reviewer credit for their work. And then when we get to Monday at the end of this week and you've both reviewed your partner's paper and then revised your own paper in light of your partner's review of it, then you will hopefully leave a final draft of your paper on your Google Doc, but then download that onto your computer as a Word file, and then upload that Word file as your final submission for this paper, the interpretive working paper. And that will be the completion of this first formal assignment for the class. If that doesn't make sense, don't hesitate to post a question in the general questions forum, so that I can address it there and others will be able to read that. I've included in this week's work the guide for the advanced interpretive paper, just so you can look at that to see where this working paper comes in the progression of the class. No pressure to do that if your plate is full, but that is there in the optional resources for the week if you want to take a look at that guide. And also just to know the next stage of your work on this passage, where you're going after you finish this working phase on your study of the passage. Thanks again, everybody, for really a great week of work, and I think just earnest and rich discussion of Romans and the other material that we've been reading. It's inspiring to me. I hope you're finding it to be inspiring and nourishing for you in your life as a Christian and in the calling that God has given you. Looking forward to this week.